It's my pleasure to be here, and many thanks to you, Dr. Murthy and Lena, for doing such a great job of organizing this conference and the speakers themselves. Over the last few days, we've learned many things about great applications of artificial intelligence and advancements in businesses and through academia. And now I want to take us in a direction for something a little different. I'm sure we're all aware of GPT-3 chat and Google Bard. They made quite a splash. Microsoft and Google launched what they're calling conversational search applications in their search engines. So now we don't even have to know what we don't know in order to find out what we want to know. We can just articulate a wish, and the genie inside the machine will produce the answers that we need or essays that we need to deliver, like a phone a friend from a talk show. The problem is that we cannot be sure the information is true, original, or even exists. As you can see here, I asked the same question of both Bard and Chat GPT-3, Microsoft Stanley. And while I got a more prosaic answer from one, we see the exact same content in both answers. So I want to shift the focus from what the technology can do to what humans can do. And that's what my area of expertise, information architecture, content strategy, user experience, this is what we focus on. Not so much what the machines do, but how humans absorb what machines do, how they interact with machines in order to get them to do what they want and need. John Seely Brown talked about sense making and artificial intelligence in a presentation at Stanford in 2019. And basically what he said is that sense making, which is part of our intelligence, the foundation of it, is about shaping the knowledge that we absorb by being in the world. Apologies to Dr. Seely Brown if that's not what he intended, that's what I took away. The disconnect here is that humans make sense of information and they have no sense of how to measure that intelligence. Francois Chollet, again, apologies if I have mispronounced his name, wrote an excellent essay on the measure of intelligence. And in this essay, he acutely observes that we have no definition of what intelligence is that's shared across disciplines. And we have no shared sense or tests in order to find out what that is. In the essay, he mentions that the measure of intelligence may be interpreted as a conversation rate between current state of information and the ability to perform well under an uncertain future. The question is whether or not technology will ever be able to do that. And the reason for that is information, part of intelligence, is internal. Jen Zarek-Mai, who is a professor of information science at the University of Toronto, wrote an essay about this where he says that the quality of information is part of a spectrum, that you look at data, you absorb it and internally form that into information, and that then is translated into or transformed into knowledge. But that the quality of information, the transformation of information, is inherently internal, and that it's dependent on the context, the situation, the environment, and our emotional state. In user experience and information architecture, we look at a hierarchy of needs, and we're all familiar, I'm sure, with Maslow's hierarchy. But artificially intelligent applications have a completely different hierarchy of needs. And as we can see here, there's very little mapping between the two. Machines are inherently technology-based, process-based, speed-based, whereas humans' needs are influenced by feelings, engagement, values, and moral codes. Influencing machine behavior to represent human needs would then seem to require a cross-discipline effort, a human-shaped hybrid behavior. And that, I believe, is best accomplished by broadening the circle of who is involved in the planning, development, and deployment of these applications. So my field currently of focus is search, and sentient search is neural information retrieval. We had a wonderful presentation yesterday by Ricardo Bezo-Yates about the responsibility of information retrieval systems, especially those powered by neural technology, to be transparent so that we can understand what's going on. Well, what's going on is we transform text into something that the machine can read, that being basically word embeddings, that we have pre-trained models to transform these, but we don't know if the data that is used to train those models represents the complete user base who will be using them and also be the resulting audience for their output. We find that these word vectors are then merged into another abstract vector state that is then merged into a vector, complete vector landscape. Again, we cannot absolutely determine the appropriate context for what's going on. And last but not least, a lot of this is purely hypothetical, one to the user, and also at times with the depth of these networks to those who have programmed and built them. So can we assume, or can we even hope, that there is such a thing as neural intelligence? Dr. Geoffrey Hinton, whom I believe is also at the University of Toronto and a fellow at Google, made a dramatic development in 2006 with his ability to generate images based on training data. He has since extended his research into what he is calling thought vectors. But can these really be thoughts? Or could they even be construed as being context vectors? Dr. Hinton tells us in his paper that if we convert a sentence into a vector that captures the meaning of the sentence, then Google can do much better searches. But is the meaning derived from the machine the same as the meaning that I derive from the sentences? We are now, as a result of this conference and as a result of the controversy that's going on Twitter and other social channels, of the unintended consequences from continuing to pursue the track that we're on. One of my favorite lines from Monty Python is, "Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition." And certainly we couldn't have expected the level of AI bias that we are finding. And here it is presented as statistical, which is inherent in the data set, or human, which is unintentionally or perhaps intentionally programmed in. But it's also systemic, that we have built machines that are creating their own interpretation and their own selection for use. Or we have use cases that are too narrow. This is a very famous instance from many years ago. I want to say it was like 2014 or so, where Google, when it was scanning images, using images from Flickr and from other social channels to train their models, their model identified 2 Black individuals as gorillas. And the rumor is this was because the parameters for the machine had only coded 4 shades of black skin. And so the default then for the machine was to go to the next level of categorization, which was not human. Or we have the MIT Media Lab that built a serial killer artificially intelligent program. Do we really need this? And if this is a direction that a university research institute can go in, certainly it's a direction that individuals whose intentions are much less academic could go in. And last but not least, we have poorly trained training data. I'm sure this is familiar to everyone, Microsoft's Tay, that was released onto Twitter as its training data, and in a span of 24 hours became a foul-mouthed, racist misogynist. This to me is the problem, that for the individuals who are studying this and developing it, for the individuals who are building these applications and then release them, there seems to be in the middle a space that is not completely understood. And I believe this is the root cause of many of our issues. They can tell us, those who build these systems, what the architecture is, but what they cannot tell us is what goes on inside that architecture and inside the application that is occupying it. So I believe that the time is now that we move to a next generation of AI development and AI study. Perhaps it's time to retire how we design and develop these applications and approach a new way of getting to the next version of what we already have. There have been many organizations, Merck, Ericsson, even AWS, who have presented at this conference. They all have user experience professionals. They all have information architects. They all have content strategists whose sole focus is to study how humans interact with technology in these very specific areas and how the technology impacts that interaction. 19 years ago, I was at my first academic conference in Dublin, Ireland. And at that conference, Dr. Carol Kulthow, who is a very well-known information scientist, I believe at Rutgers, her keynote focused on this exact problem, where she said there was a lack of academic cooperation between allied disciplines. She even pointed out, and it's true at the University of Washington, that the computer science department and the information science department are at completely opposite ends of the campus. What we need is to bring these disciplines closer together. And what I beg is that we bring practitioners such as myself into the mix. What you see before you is a guiding principles document that I put together for a client engagement. And as you can see, we have the system principles on the left, and we have the user principles on the right. Documents such as this, use cases that look at system behavior and human behavior, I believe will be a step towards realizing solutions to the problems that we are currently having. Next, information architecture, my passion and my vocation, has strong components to bring into the mix. Ontology to establish logical and consistent relationships. Taxonomy to organize those categories into logical and consistent subcategories. Naming that will provide labels for both systems and for human-facing interfaces. Markup that will make documents more accessible to technology. And equity, that we do data validation, that we use heuristics and methodologies that exist within our disciplines to lend to the development of these applications and to validate that the data is in point of fact as generally applicable to the population at large as possible. Next, information architecture also relies on soft system methodology. That is the ultimate cross-discipline approach, where you build a consensus model that would involve computer science, information science, linguistics, human-computer interaction, along with web development, information architecture, content strategy, user experience. You use this model to get the information that is needed for the various system components, and then together identify the wide and subsystems that will be supported. And then you create and structure an analysis and a design process that facilitates the mapping of information to issues. And next, information architecture is also about user experience, where we delineate qualitative dimensions that define user understanding, that we represent emotions, not just the needs, and do so through what's called an empathy profile. But most importantly, that we map out a journey for the humans as well as the machines. Next, information architecture is about content. And here what we do is try to define the intent behind the queries that customers are giving us in search engines or behind the needs. We establish connections and contextual relationships so that the system can support its understanding of what content is about and how that aboutness is extended into other topic areas. And then we conform this to categories, sort of a human annotation with meaningful labels that pertain to the topic, the journey, the audience, or the visibility in search results, if you are niche, as I am, in a search-involved world. American history icon Benjamin Franklin is rumored to have said at the signing of the Declaration of Independence from England, "We must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly, we will hang separately." I believe strongly that this can be said about the current methodologies for the application, development, and deployment and management of artificial intelligence. We can continue as we are, walking parallel paths with blinders on and talking amongst ourselves, or we can sit at the same table, combine our collective skills, and integrate intelligence to build solutions and mitigations together. If we don't, we're going to end up with where we seem to be heading now, which is 3 raccoons in a raincoat. I love that phrase. It came from someone I follow on Twitter, who is a machine learning scientist. And it aptly describes what we've been experiencing over the last few weeks. Bing releases an AI-powered search chatbot that falls in love with the interviewer and wants to be released. And Google releases a search chatbot that makes a calculation error and their stock shares drop $100 billion in price. That's what happens when you get 3 raccoons in a raincoat doing AI behind the scenes. Again, my thanks for sticking with me through this. I hope we all get to work together on these problems.